You walk into your apartment. You close the door. And before you even take off your shoes, your hand is already reaching for something. A phone, a remote, a speaker across the room. Not because you need music, not because you're expecting a call, just because the quiet, for some reason, feels wrong. You've probably never questioned this. Almost nobody does. But the real answer is far stranger than you think. Your brain was never built for silence. It was built for a world that was almost never quiet. And when it was, that quiet usually meant something was about to go badly for you. Think about the last time you were truly alone with no sound at all. Maybe it was late at night. Maybe the power went out. How long did it take before you felt the urge to check your phone, hum something, or just talk out loud to nobody? For most people, it's less than a minute. In 2014, a psychologist named Timothy Wilson ran an experiment at the University of Virginia that became famous almost overnight. He asked people to simply sit alone in a room with their thoughts for 15 minutes. No phone, no book, nothing to do but think. Most people found it unpleasant. Some found it so unbearable that, when given the option to press a button that delivered a mild electric shock to themselves, they chose to shock themselves rather than sit in silence with nothing but their own mind. Men, especially. 2/3 of the male participants shocked themselves at least once. One man shocked himself 190 times in 15 minutes. Why would a person choose pain over quiet? To understand that, you have to go back much further than 15 minutes in a lab. You have to go back roughly 200,000 years to the world your ancestors actually lived in. For most of human history, the natural world was rarely silent. Insects clicked, birds called, wind moved through grass, distant animals shuffled and grunted and cried out. This constant low hum of noise was, in a strange way, reassuring. It meant the environment was alive and behaving normally. It meant nothing dangerous was creeping close enough to make the birds stop singing. But when that background noise suddenly dropped out, when the birds went quiet, and the insects stopped clicking, that silence meant something specific. It meant a predator was near. Every living thing paused because every living thing was afraid. Your ancestors who survived long enough to reproduce were the ones who felt a jolt of alertness the instant the world went quiet. The ones who felt nothing, who stayed relaxed in a sudden silence, were far more likely to be the ones a leopard actually caught. So silence became wired into the human nervous system as an alarm, not as peace. Your amygdala, the almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep in your brain responsible for detecting threats, still treats sudden silence as a signal worth investigating. It doesn't know the difference between an ancient forest and your living room. It only knows that quiet, historically, has been dangerous. This alone would explain some discomfort, but it doesn't fully explain why a modern person, safe in their own home, with no predator for 1,000 miles, still can't sit in a quiet room without reaching for a shock button. For that, you need to look at a second researcher. John Cacioppo spent much of his career at the University of Chicago studying something he called the neuroscience of loneliness. Cacioppo found that when people are isolated, or even just quiet and unstimulated for extended periods, their brain activity begins to resemble the pattern seen during physical pain. Silence, in the absence of social contact, doesn't just feel neutral. It can register in the brain almost identically to being physically hurt. That's because for nearly the entirety of human existence, being alone and unheard was, quite literally, a death sentence. Humans are not built to survive individually. You were never meant to hunt alone, defend yourself alone, or raise children alone. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar has spent decades researching how human brains evolved specifically to track and maintain relationships within a group that for most of history hovered somewhere around 150 people. Being cut off from that group, physically or socially, meant no one to share food with, no one to warn you of danger, no one to help if you were injured. Silence often meant you were alone, and alone meant vulnerable. So your brain built two separate alarms that both point at the same target. One alarm says the world has gone quiet, which means danger might be near. The other alarm says you are unheard and unaccompanied, which means you might be socially abandoned. Both of those signals, stacked on top of each other, are exactly what a modern quiet room triggers, even when you're perfectly safe and perfectly alone by choice. Here's the part that should genuinely stop you for a second. You are not weak for reaching for your phone in a silent room. You are not broken for needing background noise to fall asleep. You are running an ancient survival system exactly the way it was designed to run. The system simply has no way of knowing that the modern world removed the actual danger while leaving the alarm switch fully intact. Now think about how thoroughly modern life has been engineered around this exact discomfort. Restaurants play music you never consciously hear because owners have learned that dead silence in a dining room makes people uneasy and leave sooner. Offices hum with air conditioning and distant conversation for the same reason. Elevators, waiting rooms, retail stores, all of them layer in some form of low ambient sound, not for atmosphere. To prevent the specific, low-grade dread that pure silence produces in a human nervous system built for constant background noise. Even the algorithms behind your favorite apps understand this better than you do. Every autoplay feature, every notification chime, every video that starts before you've asked for it exists because silence is a gap, and gaps make people anxious enough to fill them immediately. You are not choosing distraction because you're lazy or addicted in the way people often assume. You are answering a 200,000-year-old alarm the fastest way available to you. But here's the twist that most people never learn, and it changes everything about how you should think about quiet. The same researchers who documented how uncomfortable silence can be also found something else. When people are guided through silence rather than thrown into it unprepared, the discomfort fades remarkably fast, and something closer to clarity takes its place. Meditation researchers have repeatedly found that after the first several uncomfortable minutes, people's stress hormones actually begin to drop below their normal resting baseline. The alarm doesn't ring forever. It rings loudly at first, specifically because it hasn't rung in so long. Give it a few minutes without feeding it noise, and it starts to quiet itself down. In other words, the discomfort you feel in silence is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that a system built for a much louder, much more dangerous world is finally getting an update it never expected to receive. So the next time you walk into your apartment and your hand automatically reaches for the remote before your shoes are even off, notice it. That reach is not really about entertainment. It's a 200,000-year-old reflex, inherited from ancestors who listened for the exact moment the birds stopped singing, mistaking your quiet living room for a quiet forest that once meant something was about to go very wrong. You walked into your apartment expecting nothing, but the silence you were so quick to fill was never empty at all. It was full of every ancestor who ever survived by fearing it.